Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or it's 2 a.m. Good a bit already. This is Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon. I had this whole episode pretty much planned out since the beginning of the week after doing a little bit of research, but I have to talk about a serious subject later on in the episode. I'm going to save it till the very end, but it does kind of switch up my formatting a little bit. But regardless, the Microsoft Surface tablets are all out. They've been out for a while, but now they've been out and we can get our hands on the dirty details. Exactly what's going on in these machines, exactly what the benchmarks are, and the same thing goes with the iPad Pro. It actually didn't take long for at least some early benchmarks that are well, I shouldn't say reliable, because I have some doubts about them, but we have some benchmarks, so we can actually test to see if they are desktop-grade processors. Here's a spoiler. They aren't. Anyway, I'm going to start with the Surfaces. Lately, I've been asked about the Microsoft Surface tablets. We are now in the 4th generation of these things. And the lineup goes as such. We have the Surface 3, the Surface Pro 4, and the Surface Book. For those of you who know nothing about tech, this sounds like one hot mess. That this just makes no sense, and that I've probably just listed 3 separate products that have nothing to do with each other than the fact they have Surface in the name. You would be wrong. They are related. They actually share a lot of the same DNA. So we're going to go over that real quick. We're going to start at the bottom with the Surface 3. The Surface 3 is the entry level, but I still wouldn't expect anyone to really get this thing as a Christmas present. It's kind of on the expensive side. You know, it's a 10-inch tablet. Its screen resolution is full 1080p. In fact, above that, 1920 by 1280. So it's a little bit more than a 16 by 10 screen, which is good. Honestly, I think the 4:3 aspect ratio that the iPad has kept is ideal for tablets because it feels more like an actual piece of paper to work with. A lot of other ones try to go for widescreen, and this is no exception. This is closer to not widescreen and close to that 4:3, but it's not there. Not even close. So there's that minus to it, but that's not much of a minus. I know I just said a whole lot of things that kind of contradict each other, but stay with me for a moment. Anyway, this thing weighs 1.3 pounds. It's a little bit on the heavy side, but it's still tolerable. It's not as light as an iPad. So there's that little minus to it, but here's where things get interesting. We have 10 hours of video playback. That's really good. It comes in either 64 gig storage capacity or 128 storage capacity. With the 64 gig storage capacity, it comes with 2 gigs of RAM. With 128 storage capacity, it comes with 4 gigs of RAM. And the part that's very, very interesting about this is the fact that it has a quad-core Intel Atom processor in it at 1.6 gigahertz. This sounds both really good and really bad. On one hand, it's quad-core. On the other hand, it's only 1.6 gigahertz. Neither one of those things is what's important. What's important is the fact that this is an x86 processor. What this means, for those of you who aren't in the tech world, is that the guts of this tablet run on the same architecture as your everyday laptop and desktop. Anything you can do on your laptop or desktop, you can do on this. It's not going to be as fast as your laptop, but it'll get the job done. You want to run Microsoft Word? You can run on this, no problem, no workaround, no weenie down tablet version or anything of that nature. It'll run full Office. It'll run full games. You're not going to be able to do hardcore gaming on this. You're not going to be able to run... you might run StarCraft 2, just not really well. But you're not going to run like Crysis or Fallout 4 or anything of that nature on here. That's not happening. Don't even think about it. That's really the biggest news about this. This also means that it runs full Windows 10. No RT, no Windows Phone 10, no Android, no iOS, no Ubuntu Linux, nothing. It is pure Windows 10, unhindered. That is huge. Flat out. Almost every other tablet you're going to get out there, you're going to find running usually Android on it. There might be some exceptions. I know, I actually do know that Dell and HP both make x86 space tablets out there. So it's not that legendary, but for the Surface line, the entry level is always this ARM-based piece of garbage that you just had to buy it and then instantly regret it. Now, these machines also come in Wi-Fi only and Wi-Fi and LTE versions. So that means you can, in fact, pair it with a carrier and get data on it. Now, I do not believe you can get a data plan like you can on the iPads. The iPads, straight on the machine, you can just sign up for a data plan, and they actually have much lower rates than they normally do. At least that's the last time I used the iPad. Now that a lot of carriers have done away with contracts and they're redoing how they do data to begin with, it's kind of weird. But, someone else will have more of that data, more of that information than I do. I'm more interested in the guts and the capabilities of these things. As far as LTE and whatnot, contact your carrier and whoever you're going to go with. The ports on here. Another big point here. We have a full-sized USB 3.0 port on here. That means you can hook up any keyboard, any mouse, no problem on this thing. You have a mini display port. Mini display port means you can also use a dongle and get HDMI out of this thing. So if you have family videos on this thing, you can hook it up to a TV and play them. If you have Jackbox games like I do, you can hook it up to the TV and then everyone else can keep playing. Don't have to worry about anything. You do have a micro SD card reader, so you can expand the storage up to what's the biggest micro SD card? Probably like 256 or 512. Some stupid huge number like that. More than you need for a tablet, easily. There's also a micro USB charging port. Now, I don't know if you can use a dongle on the micro USB charging port and get a second USB port. Part of me doubts it, but I don't know. I can't find the information anywhere. You have a headset jack, and then of course you have the cover port. The cover port is just the kickstand covering the back of it. And you have, like I said earlier, you have Windows 10. You have a 1 year of Office 360 with OneDrive Cloud support on it, if you're into that sort of thing. I personally think anything that's a limited time of anything, why bother? But whatever floats your boat. The front camera is 3.5 megapixels, so not bad. Rear camera is 8.0 megapixels with autofocus, which, not bad. You have microphone and stereo speakers, made by Dolby. Ambient light sensor, proximity sensor, accelerometer, gyroscope, magnetometer. The LTE version does also have GPS, assisted GPS, and GLONASS. I'll be perfectly honest, I have no idea what GLONASS is. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. But the GPS and assisted GPS is actually really nice. If you're in the car, you can just quickly look up Google Maps. No problem. So, that's another thing to keep in mind. And what's in the box? None of that's important. It just all it says what's in the box, the tablet, and the power supply, and a guide. The end. So, what are the prices of these things? The prices, if I can find them, Okay, there we go. I knew I had them up. For the baseline, which is 64 gigs and 2 gigs of RAM Wi-Fi only, is $499. To get that in LTE is $599. If you want 128 gigs of storage and 4 gigs of RAM Wi-Fi only, that's $599. And then another $100 if you want 4G added with that. So $699 for LTE and $599 for LTE, respectively, for the two sizes. What do I think about this? There's only one model on here that's worth anything to me. And that's a 128 gig model. And the only reason it's worth anything to me is because of 4 gigs of RAM. If you have ever tried to use Windows 10 on 2 gigs of RAM, you know what suffering is. Windows 10 needs a minimum of 4 gigs of RAM to function, period. Don't let anyone try to convince you can get away with 3 gigs of RAM or 2 gigs of RAM. Well, you can get away with 3 gigs of RAM, but you're cutting it close. 4 gigs of RAM is basically the minimum that you don't have to worry about. If you are doing any sort of high-end applications, minimum of 8. High-end applications include games, video editing. You know what a high-end application is, I would hope. Games are high-end applications. Surprise. So yeah, that's where I stand on that. You have to go for the 128 gig version of it. Don't even look at the 64 gig. As much as I'd say go for 64 gig and just pop in a micro SD card, the 2 gigs of RAM is a deal killer. Absolutely deal killer. Alright, so that's the entry-level model. Basically, you start at $600 if you want one that's worth anything. So let's move on to the... Oh, I forgot about the accessories. How could I forget? Oh, what was I thinking? Give me a moment here. I need to have this load up. So, what does everyone know the Microsoft Surface for? It's the accessories. It comes with a stylus, and it comes with the cover. Well, not quite. The cover is, for those of you who don't know, a magnetically attached keyboard that covers the screen. The keyboard, actually, they used to have ones that were just felt only, and typing on them felt like you were typing on a concrete floor, and it was painful as heck. Now, they are all tactile keys. There is give on them, and there's actually more give on these than there are on the MacBook. That's terrifying. There is also a trackpad on this. So, with this cover, you turn this tablet into a laptop. The cover is $130. That's kind of expensive for a cover, right? But you get a keyboard with it. You get a backlit keyboard with it. These are backlit keys on this. Which, I am a huge fan of backlit keys. My main keyboard for my rig is backlit, so I can actually work in the dark and feel like a hermit. The stylus... Unfortunately, I haven't really had a chance to really draw or try anything really artsy with the stylus at all. I should have the last time I was at the Microsoft booth at the mall, and I feel bad for not doing that. But you live and learn. The stylus is $50. And that's... I actually want to say that this particular stylus for the 3 is the last gen one. So I want to say that doesn't charge. So that's very similar to Wacom technology. Alright, so that's that. The stylus is $50. The cover is $130. You get to pick your colors. Cover comes in black, navy blue, red, and bright red. Don't get bright red. It looks terrible. Just saying. The red looks more tame. The bright red just looks flamboyant. Like, seriously. Look it up. I'm not a fan of it. The pen also comes in black, dark blue, and red. So not much in color options, but At least there's some. I would have liked a green or something else. I mean, it just seems like with just dark blue and dark red and radioactive red, it just seems like stuff's missing. Anyway, we need to move on. I just spent 15 minutes on one tablet and I've got 2 more to go through. Surface Pro 4. It's bigger. Part of me just wants to end it there. But I can't. I obviously can't. So for starters, the tech spec page is terrible. It's trying... Oh god, this is gross. Alright, so we have 3 processor options. We have an Intel Core M, an Intel Core i5, an Intel Core i7. It does not say on the page the specifics of these processors, but I know from other places I've looked, these are both dual-core processors. So, no quad-core action here. Memory. You can get 4 gigs, 8 gigs, or 16 gigs. I already talked about what I think about memory. You need to start with at least 4. If you're going to do some hardcore tasks on this, get 8. If you want so much overkill it's not even funny, go for 16. But that's so much overkill it's not even funny. The exterior is silver. The screen size... Where did my screen size go? There's screen size is 12.3 inches. The resolution, this is killer. The screen resolution is 2736 by 1824. I don't even know what that's technically considered as far as high def 1080p, 1080i, or what that is. I know it's not any of those things I just said. It's definitely above 1080p, but it's definitely under 4K. The point is that it's sharp as hell. The aspect ratio is 3 by 2, which might be what the other one was. Got an ambient light sensor, we got a gyroscope, we got an accelerometer. The graphic options, if you choose the Core M, you get Intel HD 515, which is eh. If you get the Core i5, you get Intel HD 520, which is eh. And if you get Intel Core i7, you get eh. I know it doesn't sound like much, but they're all mediocre graphic cards. They're all kind of a notch above each other. The Iris Pro is going to be the closest there to being a graphic card that might be considered discrete, but it's not. You can game on it, but it's not gonna replace your gaming rig anytime soon, or ever, really. Unless you're trying to play Doom, this will definitely play Doom, or StarCraft 1, or anything from 2005 or earlier. It might not. I don't know. If you're really going to play some really old stuff, you know what you need to look for. Ports, we got a full-size USB 3.0, we have a micro SD card reader, we have a headset jack, mini... Okay, we got everything the other one had, except for a new port called Surface Connect. Oh, Surface Connect is the new charging port. Okay. So we lose the micro USB charging, and we're now at Surface Connect, which is, proprietary connection, but it also connects to docks. The docks I'll look at if I have time. Storage, we have 128 gigs, 256, 512, or a terabyte. All solid state options. Weight, the Core M series is 1.69 pounds. Core i5, Core i7 are 1.73 pounds. So a little heavier if you get the more powerful options, but that's not too unexpected. One thing I'm noticing is that there is not an LTE version. This is Wi-Fi only. So if you want to use this in the field with no So if you want to use this in the field without Wi-Fi, you've got to bring a phone with that's a mobile hotspot. Price. You've got a lot of prices to play with. This thing starts at $899 for the Core M version, and it can go all the way up to this loading screen. Alright, Core i7 with 16 gigs and a terabyte can go all the way up to $2,699. Alright, if you know anything about me, you know what I'm going to say next. Do not get an Intel Core i7 with 16 gigs of RAM and a terabyte solid-state drive. That is overkill and way too much money. For $2,699, just give it to me and I'll get you several good computers. I'll get you a tablet and a freaking mobile workstation for that much money. Just split them in two. It's just kind of pointless to do it that way. But let's see what the best I can do with just the Core i7. With just the Core i7 at the lowest specs, which is 8 gigs and 256 gigs of storage, is $1,600. That's way too high. Alright, so going down to the Core i5 model with 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs, $1,000. 8 gigs brings up $300, and wow. So you can just go around and kind of play with it and figure out what matches your needs. If you held a gun up to my head and said you have to buy one of these right now, it would be the Core i5 model with 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gig internal storage. $1,000, that would be it. Oh, and this one does come with the stylus. You do not have to buy the stylus separate. But you do have to buy the cover separate. And the cover is a bit more expensive. I lied, the cover is not much more expensive. I lied again, the cover is not more expensive at all. They are still $129. What threw me off is that the first one that's selected by default is the Microsoft Surface Pro 4 type cover with fingerprint ID, that there's a fingerprint reader on there that's used for I don't think anything yet. The rest of them are just standard one. The keys are actually more spaced out on this one. It actually looks more like a standard laptop keyboard. The one for the Surface 3 was more cramped, and there was a lot less space to play with. But yeah, these are more normal, and I am out of time in this break, so we're going to have to get to the Surface Book next, the look into the Surface Book, the iPad Pro, and then somehow I have to get the Windows 10 Big Brother bit into the next segment, because that last segment, I swear I am dedicating to something serious. Be right back.
How did I end up here? Lying in your arms.
Welcome back, Eagle Eyes on Tech. My name is Eagle Falcon. So, the Surface Book. This came out of nowhere. Like, Apple loves to surprise people. The thing is that everyone's pretty much figured Apple out and has just decided to look at supply chains, and they figured out how to beat Apple to the punch on their own surprise. No one had any idea that Microsoft was working on a laptop-ish thing. Alright, so what is this thing? It looks like a laptop, but it is a tablet. So let me explain. It looks like a laptop, except it's got this kind of metallic bend that connects the keyboard and the screen. The screen itself, you can even tell along the edges. There's a perforated edge that is the air vents, just like on all the other Surface tablets. There's no kickstand on this. The hinge instead acts as that element. The other thing is that, unlike the other Surfaces, when you detach the computer portion, the top part, from the keyboard, it needs to unlock it. And this seems weird, but I know why. And this is actually going to surprise a lot of people in the tech world, because I don't think anyone really knows why this has to happen. So, let me get through the specs first. First off, we have the 6th generation Core i5 or i7 processor. No Core M option on here. If you have a Core i5, you are stuck with Intel HD 520 graphics. However, there is also an i5 and an i7 option to have an NVIDIA GeForce GPU on here. More on that later. Memory, we have 8 or 16 gigs of RAM. I already said just stick with 8 gigs, you're never going to use it anyway. We've got 2 full-size USB 3.0 ports, we have a full-size SD card reader, the Surface Connect charging port, headset jack, mini display port. We have an ambient light sensor, an accelerometer, a gyroscope, and a magnetometer. We have a 5 megapixel front-facing camera and an 8 megapixel rear-facing camera. I don't think I've actually said this on the show. I don't like rear-facing cameras on tablets. I am never going to hold up my tablet to try and take a picture unless I'm desperate. And I guess when I'm desperate, I'll finally be glad I have it, but just why? Why bother? When is there ever going to be a situation where it's going to be easier to take a picture with my tablet than there is my phone? It just seems silly to me. The front-facing camera, I get. There's video conferencing, and you're actually going to be doing that with a tablet, or a laptop in this case. So the fact that it's a full 5 megapixel front-facing camera, that is really nice. We have 802.11ac Wi-Fi on this thing, which is backwards compatible to ABGN, 4.0 Bluetooth. The other ones had Bluetooth too, I just didn't mention it. We have a TPM chip for enterprise security. For those of you who don't know what it is, it doesn't matter to you. I know that sounds really hoity-toity, but it's a feature you will never use. It's basically used for huge businesses that want to make sure that nobody can get into their laptops. It's a very nice feature for business world. For those of us down here in the real world, who cares? The display is a 13.5 inch screen. So almost a 14-inch laptop. So as a tablet, it's huge. It's actually bigger than the iPad Pro. So it's good that it's actually a laptop. Aspect ratio is 3:2, just as the other Surfaces were. The resolution is 3000 by 2000. This is a 4K screen. Not exactly a 4K screen, but it basically is a 4K screen. Keep that in mind when looking at the resolutions for that. Not that it matters, I mean, it's 267 pixels per inch. It's beyond the point your human eye can comprehend the pixels. Unless you, put your eye as close as you can to it. It weighs 3.34 pounds, including the keyboard. So, it weighs about as much as a normal laptop. You've got a physical power button, you've got physical volume buttons, and it's silver. That's the only color it comes in. Very MacBook Pro-esque. Which actually brings me to my next point. This is more of a MacBook Pro than the MacBook Pro. This has more horsepower in it than every 13-inch MacBook Pro that Apple has to offer. Period. It has the same processors, but as every Pro laptop should, it pushes the envelope by having a dedicated GeForce graphic card in it. Now, it doesn't have to be a GeForce card. It can be an AMD Radeon, or it can be an NVIDIA Quadro, or it can be an AMD Fire card. It doesn't have to be GeForce. I said that improperly. But it has a dedicated graphic card. One of the things that's pissed me off about Apple as of lately is that they've done a lot of this "it's good enough" sort of mentality. And it's nowhere as blatant as it is in the MacBook Pro line. As far as the MacBook Pros used to be, or what the PowerBooks used to be, this Surface Book made by Microsoft is closer to what those laptops stood for than the current generation of MacBook Pro. Period. Oh, and it has 12 hours of battery life. Surprise! Alright, now the price. The price starts at $1,500. And that's all the detail I can give you on this right now. That's also why I would have loved to have done a Computer Wars of this thing versus the MacBook Pros. But I can't. Because I'm looking at the site right now where you buy this stuff. If you just try to add to cart, there's only one option, and that's for the lowest end one at $1,500. There's no option to upgrade it. And if you were going to upgrade this thing, you have to get the dedicated GeForce graphic card. You just have to. So, I alluded to the mystery that I found the answer to earlier, and no one else seems to have it. So, what is it? Well, one thing that's kind of a mystery with this thing is, first off, what's in the keyboard? And why does it have to wait to undock from the keyboard? The only reason there'd ever be that is that there's a mechanical latch that has to release, or there's hardware being gained or lost. And the answer is the latter. There is hardware in the keyboard. iFixit has actually looked through this. And as you would expect, there are batteries in the keyboard. But the bigger thing of note is that the graphic card, the NVIDIA custom chip, is on its own little dedicated board under there with its own little fan. Now, one thing I don't like about this particular design is that the exhaust for this thing is pointed directly at the hinge, and it doesn't look like it has a good way. It doesn't look like it has a very good way to pump air in or out. But this is only a low-end graphic card that's only like a GeForce like 930 or 940. iFixit thinks that it's closer to the GeForce 940, which isn't technically out yet, I don't think. I could be wrong on that one. But they think it's closer to that. So it might be like a GeForce 935M. When I was test driving one of these things at the Microsoft booth, the booth lady said that it was a 920M. And the chip looks too big to be that. So I don't know. I don't expect... Here's a rule of thumb. If you ever want specifics on a laptop, do the research yourself. Never take the sales lady or salesman's word on it. 9 times out of 10, they're just given their own talking points and just use that to try and make it seem more amazing than it actually is. That's Sales 101, is making anything sound better than it actually is without actually lying. And she was probably just saying 920 because that was the first thing she could find. There's been a lot of speculation as to what this custom chip is. That's been there. iFixit found it. It's in the keyboard, which is why it has to undock. And then there's also an entire board that controls everything else. The SD card reader, the extra ports and everything that's on there, and etc., etc. So that's that. I definitely also recommend, if you're just interested in how this thing is put together, definitely check out iFixit's Teardown. Very, very cool stuff. But then again, I also love this sort of stuff. I love seeing computers being taken apart and seeing what makes them tick. So that's enough of Microsoft. The iPad Pro. Oh boy. The iPad Pro. Nobody uses a stylus, Apple says. Nobody wants a keyboard with their tablet, Apple said. Nobody wants a giant iPad, they said. Nobody wants a giant iPhone, they said. Here we are. The giant 13-inch pile of hypocrisy in the Apple world. So for those who don't know, the iPad Pro is a very light tablet in the Apple world. It's 1.4 pounds, so it's about as heavy as the original iPad was. Massive screen resolution, massive power under the hood, quad speakers. It has a keyboard dock for a keyboard cover. Not we've ever heard of that before, Microsoft. It has its own stylus that needs to recharge. Oh, that's one thing I did forget to mention. The new styluses for the Surfaces, for the Surface Book and the Surface 4, do need charge. They do need a charge like once a year. I'm not sure how accurate they are compared to a Wacom stylus. If they're just as accurate and need a charge, that's a fail. Flat out. If they do some of the tricks that the Apple stylus does, then So let me just get this rant out of the way, because this thing has had it coming for a long time. Nobody wants a giant 13-inch tablet. Nobody even wants to look at the Surface Book as a tablet. They look at it as a laptop. That's where Microsoft did that correctly. You can take it off, you can hand it off to someone else and show them information, but you don't have to lug it around as a giant thing. You can fold it up like a laptop. This iPad Pro wants so hard to be a Microsoft Surface. It wants to do it so bad that's not even funny. Pardon the clicks for a minute here. I know that was intolerable. And I apologize for that. But I realized I didn't have the site up that had all of my prices. Because Lord knows I need to tell you all about the prices on this thing. So, let's get the specs. It's 12.9 inches, 4:3 aspect ratio, 8 megapixel rear camera, mediocre front-facing camera, you know, good enough. It's got a smart connector. Smart connector lets you connect accessories to the side of it, such as a keyboard cover that you can purchase with the iPad Pro. It is a new, powerful, custom A9X processor. That part doesn't annoy me. What annoys me is that Apple's claim during the keynote was that the A9X delivers desktop-level performance. They claim this tablet can be as powerful as a desktop. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. no matter how far technology advances, your 2-watt chip cannot outperform my octa-core Xeon rig with 12 gigs of RAM in it. It can't. And my rig is 8 years old. I gave him the benefit of the doubt at first. I didn't want to call complete BS right away. But now I have benchmarks. Now I have proof. Is this faster than a desktop? According to Ars Technica, who has these benchmarks, and these were the only benchmarks I could find that compare the iPad Pro to not a phone. According to Ars Technica's single core performance, the iPad Pro beats out a Core M, a Core i5, and a higher-end Core i5 from the MacBook, MacBook Air, and Retina MacBook Pro. It also beats out the Core i5 that's in the Surface Pro 4. That's nice, but here's my problem. These are all 15-watt parts. On top of that, this is just Geekbench 3. Now, the other thing is that this is only single core performance. And it's barely, underline barely, beating out... In fact, it's not even beaten out. It's not beating out... Okay, I read this all wrong now. Okay, so the iPad Pro beats out the Core M and the Core i5 and the MacBook Air. For those of you wanting, the MacBook Air smokes the MacBook. Hands down. About a 400 benchmark difference. 2446 to 2879 on single core performance. The Core i5s in the Surface Pro 4 and the Retina MacBook Pro beat out the iPad Pro barely, by a negligible amount. The only thing that MacBook Pro the only thing the iPad Pro beats out the other two at is memory, which is kind of weird. That's mostly because of how ARM's built, I think. Because ARM, they have the memory in the same SIC. But then you get to multi-core, and the Retina MacBook Pro and the Surface 4 destroy the iPad Pro. Absolutely destroy it. MacBook Air barely beats it, and the MacBook just lags behind because the MacBook was a terrible plan from the get-go. Graphic performance. The iPad Pro beats, hands down, pretty much all of the integrated Intel parts. Until you get to on-screen. When you get to on-screen tests, that means actual real-life tests, then the MacBook Air beats out the iPad Pro. The Retina MacBook Pros, both the 13 and the 15-inch, get stomped by the iPad Pro. Which tells me one of two things. Either A, these benchmarks are garbage, or B, Apple did something to the MacBook Pros that they're suffering even more than they should be to power... Oh, wait, no, I know exactly what it is. It's because the Retina MacBook Pros have to power their Retina displays, which is just extra stress that those graphic cards have to perform, which is actually causing the iPads to outperform them. Oh, God. See, I said when the Retina MacBook Pros came out first, that it's like, wow, we're going to put stock graphic cards in them and have them work even harder to power this massive screen. That's what we want in a professional laptop. And there you go. There's some proof that was a bad idea, that I was right the whole time. What are the odds? Now, of course, that is assuming that these benchmarks are reliable. But here's my point, though. This is actually much more impressive than I thought it was going to be. But this is not desktop level performance. This is barely laptop performance. You're comparing this all to other Apple laptops that put form over function, form way over function, and another tablet. They don't even put the Surface 4 in the same graphic test as the iPad Pro, which seems like an odd little neglect moment there. But it's not that it matters. Do you really want a giant iPad? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And if you answered yes, listen to these prices, and then ask yourself if the answer is still a yes. You start at $800 for a 32 gig with Wi-Fi. If you want more storage, the next step up is 128 gigs with Wi-Fi only for $949. If you want more storage than that, tough. The next model up from that is 128 gigs with Wi-Fi and cellular. If you want cellular with lower capacity, tough. Those are your only options. And for a line that I praised for giving you as many options as, as much as a very limited product could, this is terrible. Flat out. And of course, this isn't even including the Apple Pencil, a stylus that needs to charge by sticking it into the charging port of the iPad. I don't know how long the charge on the Apple Pencil lasts. If it's like a year, that's fine. But the concept of having to charge a stylus is still really bad to me. Especially when it seems about as useful as a Wacom stylus. Wacom, for those who don't know, is the industry standard for artists, for digital artists. Wacom has existed since, God, at least 2002, probably even before then. They've been making grade A styluses that have never needed power, have been pinpoint accurate, been able to detect exactly how hard you're pressing against the surface. And what's the best that Apple can do? The company for creativity? A chargeable stylus that might be on par with the Wacom. Now, maybe it has a few features that Wacom doesn't. In which case, props to them. I don't know if that's really worth having to charge it, though. That seems kind of gross. I especially know that it's not worth $100 for a stylus. For those of you who don't remember, the Surface stylus was $50. Or it just came with it. The Smart Keyboard, on the other hand, is atrocious. This thing is uneven to start with. It's thicker on one half than it is the other, so you can tell right away who has a smart keyboard for iPad Pro just by looking at the case for it. I'm way over time, but I don't care. I need to get to this. It does the little triangle thing in the back, so it stands up. And then all you have is the keyboard. It looks like you got rubber domes in there, in this felt-covered keyboard. It already looks worse. So much worse than the Surface one. People have said that the iPad Pro keyboard feels great to type on. I think they're lying. I don't know they're lying yet. I'd have to get my hands on it. But just by looking at this thing, this keyboard looks terrible. On top of that, there's no trackpad. It's just the keyboard there. So it just looks awkward. You have this really narrow keyboard in front of this enormous screen. And it's not backlit, unlike the Surface keyboards. And of course, you know what the best part is? The really, really best part of all this? It's $170. $170. Fail. This is a fail. This is so dead on arrival, it's not even funny. The only people who will buy this thing are the same people who are diehard set on getting an Apple Watch. The people who have drunk so much of the Apple Kool-Aid that they just can't help themselves. That it's like a disease. They just have to. Alright, that's it for the Apple stuff. I still have one last thing to get to, and I have to get to it this segment. So let's just get through this quick. Here's one thing that a lot of people have to get over. If you're on the internet, someone can spy on you. In fact, if you're using your phone, someone is spying on you. It's irrelevant whether you're using an Android phone or an iPhone. It is possible for someone to see what you're doing. 99% of the time, nobody cares. So, I lay that anvil of truth on you as other people ask me, what about the spying that goes on in Windows 10? Here's a spoiler for you again. Just about every operating system, Mac, Windows, or Linux, have some sort of tool on them to monitor and send reports. That's basically what this boils down to. Windows 10 goes a step further by monitoring your activities and giving automatically generated recommendations based on that. You can turn this off in the settings. In fact, if you're using Windows 10, please go through your settings. Go through it line by line and customize it as you please. I strongly recommend this, especially since the Windows 10 settings are nowhere near as intimidating as they used to be. In fact, they're about as friendly as the Mac system was, or is. And that's a huge step. One thing Mac OS has on Windows for a long time is that Mac OS has been very brain dead easy to use. It's also been very brain dead easy to find all your settings. Windows 10 finally reaches that level, and I finally give them props to it. Now, you can still get at all your heavily advanced admin tools, just as you can on Mac OS, where it's still in some terrifying hidey hole under like administrative tools or the command line or something along those lines. And so it's not like we've sacrificed elements to gain this. So there. I've quickly laid that out. The tinfoil hat people, please stop spreading conspiracy theories. It's getting annoying. Especially to me. Not in my email, mind you. I've somehow managed to avoid conspiracy theories getting into my email. I end up coming to them in worse manners by finding them in person. Alright, now one last thing. There is a report going around that Windows 10 is soon going to be mandatory. That those with Windows 7 and Windows 8 will find it as a recommended update, so without you doing anything, it could install an upgrade. This is a giant, big no-no to me. And I know saying no is very childish, but that's all I can really say to it. The only thing I can really recommend is when you go into the Start menu, and I'm doing this right now so I make sure I have all the steps right. Go into the Start menu on Windows 7, go to Control Panel, go to Windows Update. Oh, and hey, look, on mine right there. Alright, 2.7 install for Windows 10. Go to Change Settings. And right at the top, you're going to see Important Updates. You want to set it to Download Updates, but let me choose whether to install them. By default, it's set to Install Updates Automatically. If you want to stick with Windows 7 as long as you can, like right now I want to because this workstation is such a colossal mess, I need to do major planning before I move into 10. Whatever your reason is, let it be whatever. Anyway, you have to set it to download updates, but let me choose whether to install them. You can also set it to check the updates, but let me choose whether to download and install them. I don't really recommend that because that just adds more time. I'd rather let them download them and just let me choose when to install them. And then hit OK. And that's it. That's all you need to do. Alright, I'm now 10 minutes over time, so I'll be right back. This is pretty much the end of the tech podcast, but please stick around. Welcome back, Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon. Today is November 14th, 2015. Yesterday, on Friday the 13th, there was a large terrorist attack in Paris. While I do not live in France, any attack of this nature is one that should never happen. Where I come from on this is that I am an atheist. Others of you may share my beliefs. A vast majority of you do not. However, although I am an atheist, I do believe religion has a place in this world. Whether you're Christian, Jewish, Islamic, Muslim, Buddhist, Taoist, whatever you might be, the fundamentals of every religion is to better yourself and to treat your neighbor well. There might be different rules within the religion as to how to accomplish this, but the goals remain the same. As someone who does not follow a religion, I still believe it is my duty as a human being that takes part in this society to still do what is right and to still treat my fellow man respectably. I do not know much about Muslims or the Islamic faith. I do know that there is a branch of it that is rather violent and forces others to convert or die.
Ah.
I so don't care right now, Facebook. I'm in the middle of something. Some might say that the Christians are just as guilty of this because of the Crusades. I would disagree. Strongly disagree. There was a dark time in their history. However, they have learned from it. Islam, on the other hand, whether it be the core belief and that those who find peace in Islam are the rarity, or vice versa, is irrelevant. The fact is that there is a branch of Muslims and those who believe in Islam, who believe that if you do not agree with them, that you deserve to die. And at this time, at least 129 people died because these people decided that they needed to, because they did not follow their way of life. It's that kind of behavior that is the worst. Hands down, the worst. I do not care what religion you follow. You can believe whatever you want. You can believe that Jesus Christ was born on the 25th of December and then died on Easter it died on, what was it? It was Good Friday. On Good Friday and then rose on Easter for our sins. You can, I'm not even going to go into details because I'm going to mess up everything. You can believe whatever you want, is the point. As long as you treat your fellow man with respect, or your fellow woman if you want to just be that detail-oriented and be annoying. As long as you treat your fellow man with respect and treat them as you would want to be treated, believe whatever you want. Believe in a flying spaghetti monster for all it matters. But this is unacceptable. And I hope that our world leaders will put a stop to these sort of attacks, to this sort of group, whether it be ISIS, which was the culprit in this case, ISIL, the supposed Islamic State, Hamas, whatever. No one should have to die for what stories they believe. Whether they believe it's fact, whether they believe it's fiction and then it's just something to follow, whatever it may be. That is unacceptable. And with that moment of seriousness, I wish you all a good night. For those of you that are religious, well, you don't need an atheist to tell you to say a few prayers for them. But I always have my outro be calm and soothing for a reason. If you wish to pray during it, go ahead. If not, at least listen to it. Then let it soothe the soul. Good night.